everyone for coming to our webinar, Stakeholder Collaboration and Intimate Partner Violence at the Commission on the Status of Women conference. Thank you so much for being here. We would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Global Rights for Women gratefully acknowledges the Indigenous people of the lands we are on today. Even though we are meeting in a virtual space, it is important for us to recognize that we have benefited and continue to benefit from the theft and occupation of this land since before the United States was formed as a nation. Global Rights for Women is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and acknowledges we are on Dakota and Anishinaabe lands. We recognize the discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous people around the world. Additionally, we understand the treatment of Indigenous women is a byproduct of colonialism, racism, and misogyny that has perpetuated the continued sexual abuse, disappearance, and murder of Indigenous women. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harm of the past and present, and to consider how you can help dismantle continued oppression of Indigenous communities and restore justice. Since people are joining us from around the world, at this time, if you'd like to put into the chat the land that you're acknowledging, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce to you all our moderator, Cheryl Thomas, Executive Director of Global Rights for Women.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I know many of you are coming from different parts of the world, and some of you are at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in New York. And we appreciate you all being here so much today to talk about this hugely important topic of stakeholder collaboration and coordinated community response. And as Pat mentioned, my name is Cheryl Thomas. I am the Executive Director of Global Rights for Women, and I have worked with partners around the world and here in Minnesota for many, many years on legal and systemic reform on violence against women, which is the mission of Global Rights for Women. So I'd like to begin by just giving you a little bit of an overview of how our session will proceed today. I am going to start by introducing our wonderful panelists and giving you just a little bit about their background. And then we will go on with questions that I'll present to each panelist about their experience with using the stakeholder collaboration and the coordinated community response model. We'll use those terms interchangeably throughout this session. And we'll talk about how each one of us and our panelists have used this kind of collaborative model to enforce domestic violence and other forms of laws on domestic violence and other forms of violence, and get their communities really cooperating in improving the response to, in particular, domestic violence, but also, as I say, other forms of violence using this stakeholder collaboration model. So we invite you all along the way, please, to put your questions in the chat. Pat Cumby will be monitoring that chat, and we will be taking those questions. We'll be saving at least 15-20 minutes at the end for those. So please don't hesitate to really ask us whatever you'd like to know, and get the information you need from these experts. So first, I'll start by introducing our panelists. As I said, Iluta Lache is here. Thank you, Iluta, so much for joining us. I've had the great pleasure of working with Iluta for many, many years. And she is the founder and director of the Marta Center, which is in Riga, Latvia. She works all over the country with different kinds of programs serving survivors of violence and also children, and also has worked in the area of human sex trafficking, starting programs in Latvia for survivors of human sex trafficking. Iluta is a very passionate advocate also with her government stakeholders on systemic and legal reform. So thank you again, Iluta, for being here. Diana Vidova, go ahead, Iluta, say a few things or add anything to that introduction that you'd like to.
No, that's perfect introduction. Yeah, our passion is to work for sustainable services for victims of violence, as well as comprehensive legal protection that really works for them, so that perpetrators don't enjoy their impunity, but they get convictions, proper convictions.
Thank you, Iluta. And Diana Vidova, I have also worked with for many, many years. She's a wonderful Global Rights for Women partner, as Iluta Lache is too. And Diana founded the Dimitra Association, based first in Burgas, Bulgaria. And Diana lives in Sofia, and she's taken her service centers and programs now around Bulgaria. And I'll let her tell you how many centers there are, but she too works both on service provision for domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, and also gets deeply involved in developing allies in the government for improved systemic and legal system responses. Would you like to say anything else about yourself, Diana?
Thank you, Cheryl. It is a wonderful presentation of myself. Just to add that I'm also the court expert, and I make psychological expertise in the court for the domestic violence cases and parental alienation also. Children, parental capacity, that's all.
Thank you, Diana. And lastly, I'd like to introduce our very own Nicole Lindemeyer. She is our Director of Programs at Global Rights for Women. Nicole comes to us with decades of experience also in not only providing services to survivors of violence, but also deeply entrenched in legal and systemic reform. She's worked both on the government side and the nonprofit civil society side of things, with the first coalition in the United States, the Pennsylvania Coalition on Domestic Violence. Most recently, she was at our own Minnesota Department of Human Services and working on a manual for those who work to protect children in our system here, and giving them guidance on how to integrate the needs and laws that apply to domestic violence and domestic violence survivors into that world of child protection and child safety, which is so important. So many of us know how abusers can use children and our child protection systems and our legal systems in general to continue the abuse that they perpetrate against women and girls. So thank you all so much for joining us. Anything else you want to say about that, Nicole? I should have asked that first.
No, you captured my introduction perfectly, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so why don't we start in with our questions right away here? And as I say, please don't hesitate to get your questions there in the chat, or if you prefer to wait and ask them in person, we'll do our best to handle all those. Nicole, I might start with you, since your experience with one of the first models of coordination was with the Duluth model of coordinated community response. And that is something we use here at Global Rights for Women all the time as a guiding kind of light, really, when we work with partners around the world and in our own home state to better enforce domestic violence laws. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Absolutely. So what we refer to as the Duluth model of coordinated community response, sometimes we call it the CCR model. What that is really an interagency collaboration that helps local police, prosecutors, judges and courts, probation officers, and domestic violence service providers coordinate to better protect abused women. And what we do through the CCR model is we look to improve primarily three things. One would be we center the victim's experience in all of our interagency collaboration. We take her experience and her direct perspective with us through the system's processes, and then analyze how those processes respond to her safety. So centering the victim experience is the most important tenet of the CCR model. The second thing is really to follow and safeguard the information that the victim provides as that information travels through the system with all the different stakeholders engaged with that information. So if she is telling her story to, for example, law enforcement, that information that she gives to the police then goes also to the prosecutor, to the judge, to the probation officer, so that we are protecting her safety as her story travels through these various systems. And then the third thing that is important about the CCR model is really ensuring accountability for offenders by engaging all the different systems together to say victim safety and offender accountability run hand in hand. They're on parallel tracks of the same train. And we really want arrest, prosecution, sentencing, probation, and the opportunity to participate in a batterer's intervention program to run all together so that no one drops the ball, so that we've got a great system in which wherever the offender appears, there is an engaged stakeholder who is informed about his level of dangerousness, and they are willing to look both before their role and after their role at what will happen to that offender and how each step protects the twin goals of victim safety and offender accountability.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. And we'll come back to you and ask about your experience also in, how some of those things are done. How is it, for example, that you really do learn about and understand the survivor experience so that it can be a good guide? Okay, wonderful. So I would ask you, Diana, next, if you would explain what in your words, a collaborative model looks like, a interagency stakeholder response looks like in Bulgaria for you. And you could talk about a little bit about maybe how it started and what you are doing now.
Yes, for us, maybe the things are similar, like Nicole says, but we are a lot of states behind. A coordinated community response for us is also a network of relationships and agreements between stakeholders working to address a specific problem, such as domestic violence, for example. There are different levels of interaction, such as the level of ministries, institutions, and the level of multidisciplinary team that includes specialists from different institutions working on a specific problem or cases. For this to happen, however, preliminary preparation is necessary. First, at the level of institutions where the framework of this cooperation is described in joint agreements or project, and at the level of specific work, methods for action on the specific problem are described. We also have, and we're talking about the basic principles which are providing in CCR model, which are, of course, interagency approach, assessment of what is the risk for the victim, what is the context and severity. ongoing work with victims, real victims, emergency measures and safe intervention for ongoing violence, send help availability and accountability messages, reduction of unwanted consequences and gaps in the response of institutions, provision of emergency support and protection of the victims' persons while persisting his best interest. Sorry. I have little problem here. For example, in other one, for example, in Bulgaria, the adaptation of the coordination mechanism for the domestic violence law, which lists the responsibility and action of the various specialists responsible for the implementation of the law is pending. For example, here each institution designates a person responsible for domestic violence, including victim services providers. Does each specialist know who to contact from the other institution in order to take the appropriate action? This includes maintaining an information list of services data provided by the providers to the entire country. This information is collected and distributed now by the National Council for the Prevention and Protection of Domestic Violence, which we have from the beginning of this year. And the Metro-like organization is also the member of this council.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diana. And I see that Desislava Viktorova has joined us. Wonderful. Welcome, Desislava. Are you able to turn on your camera? I will just proceed with a short introduction of you. And if you'd like to add anything, please go ahead. Desislava
Thank you.
as you Oh, wonderful. There she is. She's with the National Police Chief Directorate in Bulgaria. She also is a participates in, I'm not sure I'm going to get the name right, but the International Association of Police. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
If you allow me, I will say good morning and good afternoon, depending of the areas of the world that we are situated now. I have put my camera on, but I see that my face is not yet in the screen. Maybe some technical problems. I will present me shortly, like I work for the Ministry of Interior in Bulgaria since 25 years. And since 20 years, I work for the National Homicide Unit. And I have the pleasure to work with Association Demetra since many years. And to know personally you and some of your colleagues from Global Right for Women since last year. But I'm on the field of domestic violence since the beginning of my career. And for 3 years, I was the Vice National Coordinator in Ministry of Interior on the questions related with domestic violence. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Desislava, for joining us. And I'm not sure what the technical problems are, but maybe as we go along here, we can figure that out so everyone can see your face. I just have to say, both Nicole and I were in Bulgaria in the fall, and it's so heartening to see when these partners, these allies in the government become so important to the NGOs and the service providers doing the direct service for the survivors. Those allyships are so important with police in particular, so that they can really, learn from the advocates and understand how their actions are helping or not helping survivors of violence, maybe even risking their safety further. So Aluta, would you please tell us how stakeholder collaboration, coordinated community response looks in Latvia, how you have developed that model?
We still develop it and seek our excellence in this. And I can tell you that we have inspired from Duluth model a lot. Because it's very inspirational when you say, Cheryl, that no women has been killed or murdered if she had reported to the system in Duluth. So it's a really powerful statement, right? And that's why we inspired a lot, and I can tell some things that we have taken over and that works, because there are so many things that we still need to work on so that they would work, right? And of course, we work with different stakeholders, because the key aspect, I think, for the community coordinated response, or that all stakeholders collaborate, is that we do have common understanding that men's violence against women, it's a crime. It's a crime, right? It's not domestic conflict. It's not, some kind of private issue, but it's a crime. And we still work on this. But what we have managed, of course, to justify the statement, or to make it functioning, that we understand that it's crime and there are offenders and victims that should be protected, we need to have measures in place. So what we have developed, and what we have in our country, we have developed functioning social services, specialized services that are implemented by NGOs or by social services. The woman chooses herself where to turn and where to get the support. And since last year, since July 1st, we have government paid consultations, 120 consultations if women have high lethality risks, or she's in a vulnerable situation. And these consultations include social worker, legal advisor, psychologist. She can also have access to accommodation, crisis accommodation, or either it's a flat or crisis room or hotel, something that she chooses if there is high lethality risks or she's in a vulnerable situation. So these are like major safety measures that we have made. But since 2014, again, inspiring from you, Cheryl, and your Duluth team, we have a protection order, or we call it temporary protection from violence, in place that actually is functioning, and women are using it. And of course, there are things that are functioning better, that are functioning less. But I think the main thing is, if women use it, if women apply, it means that they feel that it can be useful, right? And that it protects them in some way. What it means, how it functions, why women use it, because you can submit your application to court explaining in which relationships you are, how violence looks like, and you don't need to add evidence or proof or something. You just clearly describe the situation, and you submit this application to the court. And court makes decision in 24 hours, usually, if they don't have any additional questions. And in majority cases, again, they do make these decisions in 24 hours to evict, or so that the perpetrator has to leave the home, has to leave household. And usually there is question, oh yeah, but it's just for some days or something like this. But not in Latvia. In Latvia, it can last very long time until court decides differently. So even if he decides to come back in 2 years or 3 years, and it's the court has not decided that this decision is not in power, their decision about temporary protection from violence, he can face other measures that are right now, since last year, also much stronger according to our law. So and last year we had really horrible murder case that shook our society. And all the measures also, if you violate these protection measures, or if you threaten women, if you stalk her, all these measures are also much, you can get a penalty higher than before, like up to 3 years imprisonment. So And another thing that I really want to point out that is working, and it's again inspiring from Duluth, is police cooperation with social services. So whenever they go to these, they call them family conflicts or they receive emergency calls regarding domestic violence. They go to these families, and they use a tool. They have a survey that we again developed, listening to our survivors in Latvia, talking to police. We developed this tool so they fill in this questionnaire. It's not like previously they went to this spot, saw, oh, woman is alive, nothing to do, and went back. Right now they go, they ask these questions. Okay, she's alive, but we see signs in the kitchen or signs in the bathroom or signs in the garden that she really, her story is relevant, that she was really threatened, she was really pushed, knives were thrown or something like this. So they really see this, and they can also issue protection order. But they send this survey, what they have done, this answers to the question, also to social services that can connect to victims immediately and can offer their support immediately. This survey also works as evidence to the court, and court, while issuing these temporary protection measures, can also immediately how to say, oblige perpetrators to go to these courses of for perpetrators, so that they would challenge and look at their behaviors and try to improve, try to see that actually they are offenders, and the way how they behave, it's really harmful. So I will stop here, but these are just some examples showing how we try with very practical things implement this stakeholder collaboration so that victims would be safe and offenders could be accountable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lucia. And I'll come back to you in just a minute I think that the story about the murder last year in Jacopils is, I think, will be interesting to our audience, and how kind of exactly you feel if a CCR had been in place in Jacopils, like it is in other parts of Latvia, how that could have prevented that murder. So I'll come back to you. And I also would like you to talk about, if you feel it's relevant to this conversation, talk about your work in Ukraine and Uzbekistan a little bit. Let's go on next to, if anybody has any additional things to say about how stakeholder collaboration, coordinated community response model, a good one, a solid one that's really focused on leading with the experience of survivors and making sure that we're delivering the message that abusers should be held accountable for their violence. How is it able to serve survivors in an immediate crisis a bit better? Hopefully a whole lot better. Maybe, why don't I start with, let's see, why don't we start with Nicole, and then maybe we can move to you, Desislava, if you have ideas about that, how we can serve survivors in an immediate crisis when we have a good, solid CCR in place. How does that work better to make sure that we don't end up with a femicide? Mm-hmm. Nicole, would you like to talk about that just a little bit?
Absolutely. I think ideally, when a stakeholder collaboration or a multi-agency approach is used and an assault happens, an incident happens, that survivor will feel, she will trust that law enforcement will respond. And so she'll call the police. In many places, without a good model of police response, that call for help will never even happen. So the first step is having a police response at all to a call for help. At that police call, The police may respond to the incident. If the offender is still on site, they will be arrested. If the offender has left the scene, maybe an arrest warrant will be issued and the police will catch him later. A good coordinated community response has the police working in partnership with a victim service organization. So either at the scene, an advocate will come, or at the scene, the police will give the victim the contact information for the victim services program and have the survivor call them, reach out for help, and get the support services that she needs. From that initial response by the police, the information and how that information is collected is critically important. The law enforcement response needs to be one that is looking to the next step, to the prosecution, to the charging decision. And so the police are looking for evidence of the offense, both in terms of what the victim is telling them, but also at the scene. Are there broken objects? Are there damaged property? Damaged items of property? Is there a broken window, a broken lock? Are there witnesses? And should those witnesses be interviewed as well? Are there any visible injuries? And those injuries are documented. And in an ideal situation, what the police are looking for is evidence of the crime that can survive and go to trial without the victim testifying. That's an important part. From there, the arrest happens. Then we've got a charging decision by the prosecutor. The prosecutor will have that, like Iluta mentioned, a common understanding of the dangerousness of this case. And instead of perhaps pleading that case down, the prosecutor will maintain a domestic violence related charge so that all the sentencing that comes with that charge can be in effect. Whether or not the prosecutor pleads and what sentencing conditions are ordered also can be determined and influenced by that coordinated community response as well. So whether the offender is ordered to attend nonviolence classes or a batterer's intervention program, that is part of the CCR. If that abuser is ordered to attend such classes, then it would be the next system, probation, that is part of the CCR, monitoring that offender's behavior. And if the offender reoffends while on probation, immediate consequences apply. And so we can see how from an incident, it travels through these different parts of the law enforcement system. And when they have a common understanding, a shared commitment to victim safety, they respond in ways that reflect that. And it is so much more than an abstract concept. It is a practical application of caring for a victim and valuing her life enough to protect it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, that common kind of bond that all these stakeholders in the system, the legal system officials, is so important. And I would add this note to that. One of the beauties we think about a successful CCR like the Duluth model that has been so effective is that the stakeholders then in the government agencies, the police, the prosecutors, the probation, if the police aren't responding, as you say, Nicole, when they come together in those meetings, those CCR meetings, they can hold each other accountable. When we talk about accountability in a CCR, we're talking about holding each other accountable for the principles and agreements we've agreed on, in addition to holding the offender accountable. Maybe I could move on to Desislava and Diana and just talk, as Nicole was talking about, so important that original, because so often it's those frontline folks like you, Diana, and you, Desislava, who are getting the first calls. And as Nicole said, why is that so important in a CCR? And how How has that helped you in your experience in Bulgaria better serve survivors of violence or prevent femicides? Would you like to start, Desislava, or either one of you? Diana?
I will start, if you allow me.
Please.
My speech will be in the same mood as the previous speaker. Of course, the main important thing is to be trained for the police officers. Not to be trained how to behave on a crime scene or some situation with domestic violence, and to be trained how to work together with the other actors, for example, the lawyers, doctors, social workers, the municipality authorities, the representative of NGOs. It is very important to know and to work not only with our education and training, and to know the work of the other, because we are not some different parts of a chain. We are different part of a watch mechanism, and we have to work together, not to stay static in a place like different parts on a chain. To work, to feel the situation together, to read the indicators together. And when we go on a crime scene, it's very important for us to know the others' numbers that we have to call, to read the indicators, to know who we have to work on this special situation at this special time, because you know the time is critical. And on the first session of 68th session of the Commission of Women's Status these days, Antonio Guterres said that the time is now. So not the time is now at this moment, the time is for every case in the first minutes. And I will not speak about the trust, because everyone know the trust is very important of the survivors, the trust with the police, with the psychologists, with the lawyers, with everyone who will work with them. Because if one of these experts fail, it will be bad result for whole the system. Because maybe the next time this victim will not be alive to say us to deliver the information. And for us as a police officers, it's very important to have places that will host the victim, because still in Bulgaria we don't have enough crisis centers where these people can live for a short period. And for example, the psychologists will help them to solve the crisis moment, to not to live with trauma, to overcome the trauma, and after that to deliver the other information for the courts, for the prosecutors, and so on. If the victim has not the power to take decision for her or for him, we will fail, because we will wait for the other time, and maybe it will be critical. And I want to speak a little bit for the trainings. Our trainings for police officers, they are in the beginning in the police academy. And after that, we have some trainings during our working time. And I want to speak that, for example, in Bulgaria, I feel that the police officers and the prosecutors and the judges need more training about this social education, how to interview. Because for us, like experts, we need the information, and this special information that will be our evidence. And on this level, we will do our evidence-based investigation. But first, we have to walk the soul of the survivor. And that is why we need this education, how to behave in front of this person. And if you allowed me, with Diana, we prepare a small text because we want to give you this information about a project that we work together since 18 months. And National Police work together with Association Demetra. In this project, ISIDA, Innovated Solutions to Eliminate Domestic Violence, which is a Horizon Europe project and gathering 15 partners from 9 countries. Its total budget is 3 billion euro and received from European Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program and from the UK Research and Innovation under the UK government Horizon Europe funding guarantee. The project aims to combat and eliminate domestic violence by employing an enriched European approach, utilizing modern technological tools and practices and improved multi-sector experience in its activities. Because, you know, as a police officers, we usually go after the situation. So now the perpetrators, they use the technology to stalk the victims. And now we decided how to use the technology to go in front of the activities, the crucial activities of the perpetrators. The project will develop a chatbot which will employ empathetic language and inform the victims on ways to get help and assistance. And for the police officers, we will have a serious game which will provide training to primary police officers through interactive learning. That will be a serious game that will train the police officers how to interview. Wonderful. Because if you play like a game, you have all the scenarios, how I can fail and how can win, to have the win-win situation. And I will stop here because maybe Diana want to add something.
Yes, I can add something about the project. This includes chatbot, like you say, police training, but it includes also awareness campaign and education program for youth, which is a prevention program. The idea is to learn about, receive information and to learn about the violence in young ages, to know how to keep yourself, how to protect, where's the available services, who is the professionals who can help you in the situation, and first of all, before that, to recognize the violence. Because in our society, till this moment, the violence is like a norm of communication in a lot of cases, and there is a big need of the prevention among youngers. That is another part of the project, also with collaboration, of course, with the police. And with the police partnership, we have another initiative with DESI, or National Police, which is a written agreement between police, our organization, and also hospitals. And in capital, in Sofia, we write the memorandum of understanding with 10 hospitals in the town. And before that, we opened the emergency office in one of the hospitals to provide their help by the police, protection by the police, medical examine, and also psychological support. We summarize and put in one place, in one office in hospital, 3 specialists by multi-agency team, the doctor, the police officer, and the psychologist by the social services, exactly in the hospital, which were our great achievement, that we provide support by multi-agency team in one place in the hospital. hospital, especially in emergency hospital. In Bulgaria, it's happened 2 years ago, before COVID crisis. But during the COVID crisis, this office was closed because of the crisis, COVID crisis situation. And it's continue to provide the same services through the hotline, with again with different specialists, but through the hotline for the victims. And that's again show the collaboration between institutions. But it is in the level of multi-agency, of the level of professionals. In the level of institutions, it was the signed agreement, memorandum of understanding how to collaborate this between us. And now in national level, in this coordination mechanism for which I talk, it's developed now this kind of rules, for like a pathway to how to help victim and which professionals help with what, and how to make a connection each other based on our experience till this moment, experience by the project, experience with this memorandum with the hospitals. All this experience now is we are suggesting and will be part of the coordination mechanism for Bulgaria, which is developed now in this national council, which we are part on that. Just to add something, that it is very important, this shared understanding and sharing knowledge about all the professionals. That is the challenge for all of us. That is yes, challenge and problem that it's happened, but in very little small spaces, just in this town or in this hospital or in this center. It is not a general policy like at all, and that is our, like to say, our goal, to put these efforts, to put this goal in our now legislative rules, legislative framework. Exactly, which means to put share understanding and share knowledge for all professionals. It has to be common understanding about the violence, because that is missing at all, and that is the problem when we are working in a multi-agency team and takes multi-agency action. I'll stop now. And we'll continue.
That's so important. Oh, Diana, that's just so important the way you ended there, that because it's so, that is just the core, certainly of the Duluth model that we've talked about, is that shared understanding about what causes all forms of violence against women. And that is this, this power and control dynamic that is so often just is at the root of the perpetrators, what inspires him to use violence is what I'm trying to say. That without that shared understanding of where this violence comes from, it's really hard to get all of your stakeholders, your government folks, on board with that. So I'm so glad you mentioned that at the end there. I'm thrilled to learn. I also wanted to just say, the memorandums of understanding that you describe are also so important, because there is where you really have those discussions about shared understanding and the actions that are going to derive from that shared understanding. So those memorandums of understanding come at a higher level. Of course, the coordinated community response team at the case response level that meets regularly about individual cases then can actually implement the directives in those memorandums of understanding. So there, I went on there a little bit too long myself, but thank you so much for that. Iluta, I would love if you would jump in here with any comments you have about that, and tell the story that you told me recently about how you feel so strongly that if a coordinated community response, a good solid model had been in place in Jacopils last year, how that would have changed things.
Yeah, the story is that there is a small town in Latvia called Jēkabpils, and last year a woman was murdered in front of the eyes of her child, and by her stalker, by her ex-partner, and she by it shaped our society, because of course women are murdered, and they are murdered everywhere, and also in our country. But in many cases, they have not used the measures that we have so eagerly worked for and that we have in place. But this time, this woman have used all possible means what we have within the law. She has applied to police. She has requested protection orders. This perpetrator, against him, there were 18 criminal proceedings, but they were looked, the court system or judiciary system looked and worked with these proceedings separately. They didn't view this as a one case, and they didn't see that actually this perpetrator is really very dangerous, and that this woman is surviving all the time, and that she has really high lethality risks, and she has not only approached police several times and seek for help locally, but she has written a local court system to get these protection orders and police, because he violated these protection orders. But he also wrote to general prosecutor's office. She wrote to ombudsman's office, and actually she was murdered. So this shaped our society, and what we realized and what we understood, that it was lack of cooperation, lack of seeing, and this violence on or this case, these criminal proceedings, that judges didn't looked at them separately. They didn't look at this one of the one case. So there was a lot of processes initiated. We had review of our protection mechanisms, how judges make decisions, and lots of recommendations what we can improve. We finally work on our national action plan on violence against women, domestic violence, and we really strengthen our cross-institutional collaboration so that we could really have a common understanding about lethality risks to be much efficient in providing safety for victims and keeping perpetrators accountable. This, of course, has led to improvement and amendments to laws and increasing fines, not fines, but this that you really are punished for threatening, stalking, violating protection orders in more severe way. So these are our lessons learned, and we still are learning from them, and we are still working to improve system. And there are lots of communication regarding this. But another thing is how we in Latvia try to keep this issue on agenda of everybody, every institution. We organize every year cross-institutional conferences where we have police, prosecutors, health professionals, social service providers, as well as judges in one room. We have all of them in one room, at least the key stakeholders, and we discuss very topical issues, emerging issues, or review what we have done so far. And for example, last year exactly the question was how we can be better in monitoring and improving our systems if we have realized that there are high lethality risks, and if the perpetrator violates law, how we can be more efficient in our response to this. So yeah.
Thank you, Luta, so much. And you do that you know, in honor of that femicide victim and in honor of all victims, when you do those legal system and systemic changes after these tragic murders, which are also so often the inspiration for changes. And I would, you know, say just a thought here from Minnesota, where Global Rights for Women is based. You know, it's the risk, I think, is getting numb to those murders. So often just after years and years of practice and drafting laws and amending laws and legal system responses, I worry about those murders being, you know, normalized in places where our systems reform has gone on for 40 years, and they aren't inspiring changes to law, policy, and practice. You know, you may have the good laws and the good policies, but if you get lazy or just begin to accept those murders and don't really examine what's happening, not only the murders, but the continued abuse, that's a concern, I think, for folks who've been doing this work for many decades. So thank you so much for that, Iluta. Nicole, you haven't spoken for a while. Did you want to add anything to that? And then we can go to questions, because I see it's already, wow, 11:30. Wow. Did you have anything to add to that, Nicole?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points that I'm thinking about in terms of systemic responses, particularly to cases with high risk of lethality, cases where the abuse is so intense and so frequent that advocates know enough to see he's going to kill her. How do we get the systems to note that dangerousness? And I'm thinking in particular of the model called the Lethality Assessment Program. And that model is a screening tool, an assessment tool for the police to conduct at the scene of an assault, to ask questions of the survivor, to see whether there are certain risks of lethality present. And if those risks are present, that police officer will immediately call a domestic violence program and offer to escort the domestic violence victim directly to the program, to a shelter or to an emergency place. That model can be very effective at preventing homicide. There is also another model that is referred to as the fatality review model. And that is where we have a similar interagency response as the CCR is, where all of these different stakeholders come to the table after a femicide has occurred, and they review all of the case files, all of the interactions, all of the different systems responses to identify where there's opportunity for improvement. So fatality review is another model that can be used to examine a domestic violence homicide and discover what the system's reform opportunities are. And I'm thinking about how all of these successful models have at their core collaboration, coordination, common understanding, and a shared commitment. And without that commitment to turn what we believe into action, there really is an endless gap. And the only thing that can overcome that gap is advocates and activists coming together and insisting that women's lives matter, that crimes against women are in fact crimes that deserve punishment, and that men need to be held to a higher standard of nonviolence and equality. I'm looking at the screen now and I see that Cheryl has disappeared from it.
She has disappeared. Yes, I'm not really sure what's going on. I don't have a message or anything. So I thought I would, since she did mention that she wanted to take questions from the Q&A in the chat, and we have some great questions. We have a question from Shanti Baker, and this is a great segue, I think, to the whole conversation that's been happening here, which is about prevention. She asks, what do you suggest? Education, work with potential perpetrators and victims? I find we spend so much time and money after violence happens. How can we prevent all this?
I'll be the first to respond, and then I'll certainly invite others to join in. I think prevention has many forms. I think we can talk about the need for changing cultural and social norms to respect women, to respect and insist on equality. So at a macro level of society, there are changes that can be made. At the legal system level, there are many, many, many changes that can be made to prevent violence and promote peaceful resolution of conflict and insist on equal and equitable relations between men and women. There's also a notion of preventing relationship violence before it starts by targeting children and young people. That is a very effective tool of prevention. And then there are many different types of prevention, such as prevention before violence starts, prevention of the next assault after an assault has already happened, prevention of a homicide after abuse has already happened, prevention of the next homicide. So depending on how you define prevention, you're going to find a different solution to that. And Iluta, I know that you had something to contribute to this. Please do.
Yes, I do have, and I totally agree that prevention is also, if you do have proper intervention and you have a really efficient community coordinated response, it prevents, further violence. You stop the violence where at the very moment, and it's so helpful for all the family members, but also community members. But what we have, we at Martyr Centers, we do a lot with prevention. Of course, we have facilitated that there are programs for perpetrators in our country, so that they could reflect on their beliefs. First of all, that women are not some things that should be subordinated, that they are not something to be sold or bought or something like this. But we have also at Martyr Centers, we have developed programs for youth, involving youth. And this is the cycle of conversations, interactive, tasks, 17 sessions where they can reflect about what's going on with themselves, how they build their own relationships between each other, what is real friendship, what are toxic relationships, what are healthy relationships. And we see how young people, boys and girls, it's from 12 to 18, how they change. And they change not only, with their cognitive beliefs, but they change also with their behaviors that teachers and parents and can see immediately that, for example, boys have started to play with their little sisters, or they have started to help mothers at home, or they have, they started to go to school when they practically didn't do this. So you see how they change after these conversations, because the key goal is to prevent gender discrimination and violence and trafficking through these conversations.
Thank you. I'm sorry about my getting disconnected there. It looks like you guys went on just fine without me. Thank you. So I'll jump back in here and see if there are further questions. Did we answer yours, Linda and Jeannie? Did we get that one answered about?
We haven't talked about that one yet.
Okay. There it is.
So
Shanti,
we got a comment and a question from Persons Against Non-State Torture. And the question is, are you seeing that torture often proceeds femicide?
I can answer that, and the answer is yes. We see an increased level of brutality. So we see an escalation in both the frequency and the severity of the violence. What may have been a slap or a push becomes strangulation. We know strangulation is both a form of torture and an indicator that lethality is very likely to be attempted or achieved by the abuser. We know that torture represents a manifestation of dehumanization, of extreme cruelty. We see often that sexual related torture or sexual related extreme violence precedes a homicide as well. So the level of violence most certainly does accelerate over the course of the relationship, over the course of the abuser's commitment to control and coerce and dominate. And with that, the violence does increase to the level of torture. Iluta or Desi or Diana, please join in from your experience as well.
I just want to add from the perspective what we see at Marta Centers. Probably you know also about this lover boys method that, for example, you groom a young woman or a girl or a woman, whatever age she is, into relationship and find her vulnerable situations, how to keep her in this violent relationship, and then sell her body for other people, for the other men to be, used. And we see this sexual violence and this torture also as a high risk of to be for this woman to be murdered, as she is viewed as object, as something to be solved and to be used for men's benefit. And we see that also that we do not have proper legal systems in place around the world to protect from this kind of exploitation, because currently there are not efficient systems to address men's demand to utilize or to exploit women's bodies in general. So this is something that we all together have to work for more intensely to address this issue, and to help society understand that women's bodies are not for to be sold and not to be tortured in such a way.
Yes, thank you so much, Iluta. If I could just add there, Jeannie and Linda, who have been putting notes in the chat, are really very focused on making sure that non-state torture is recognized for what it is. So often we think of torture as a man, maybe a soldier who has been captured and is tortured by his captors. And we don't understand that the same things happen to women in their homes and in private situations of violence. Certainly we saw those the brutal torture, sexualized torture of women in conflict recently in conflicts around the world, in Gaza. And this is not uncommon. This is what happens during conflict. Women are often victims of sexualized torture. So it's really an interesting and important time to acknowledge that torture happens to women in their homes. Conflict situations are not just between countries and war. There's that going on. Conflict situations are going on in women's homes all the time. So anyway, just an important point to note there. I see another question in the chat. Oh, that's other questions that we have. We're coming up to the end of our time. I think we have time for a couple more questions.
We have one comment
okay.
about seeing everyday kids that are beginning to act violent and imitating what they see on social media and in movies, etc., watching a lot of violence. So what would you all like to say about that dynamic and how it contributes?
Any takers for that question? Go ahead, Nicole.
I'm glad to pick that up. I'm thinking, Diana and Desi, about the wonderful event that we saw in Bulgaria last year, where we saw an entire school with all the different grade levels presenting their beautiful presentations on violence and how harmful it is and how to be respectful and value equality. And I'm thinking in context of these wonderful children of all ages in Bulgaria presenting these anti-violence presentations, that is in stark contrast and directly counter to the negative messaging, the pro-violence messaging that children receive from other sources. And what we know about child development is that childhood is a combination of risk factors and protective factors. And protective factors include positive messages about equality and nonviolence. And when we create those protective factors, we are offsetting the balance of violence. We are counteracting these violent messages with messages of nonviolence and equality and peace and respect. And just as much as video games and television and the internet glorify violence, we, as members of a community, can glorify equality and nonviolence. And it's up to us to step up and make sure that we are vocal in our insistence that boys will not be violent little boys. Boys will be responsible, equitable, peaceful, and gentle citizens of the world in the same way that we expect that conduct of girls. And it's something I feel very strongly about, this idea of socializing boys as well as girls to grow up to value a commitment to gender equity and equality. And I saw that so clearly in those presentations in Bulgaria. It was one of the most moving sights I have ever witnessed. Diana, thank you for allowing us to be there and sharing that experience.
Thank you too. That was my answer of the comments, but you presented better than me. Just to add that some comments about the prevention, that the most important in prevention in all levels, primary level, secondary and tertiary level. I want to add something about the comments. Your comments was about the primary level, but just to add some comments of prevention in the next level, which is include perpetrators program. I missed to present it, but it is important how we measure effectiveness of perpetrator program. Here we have a good connection with the court, and all the perpetrators are sent by the court, and we to participate in education program in the specialized program, and we are measuring now their participation about the changing of behavior, about the takes accountability about their behavior with this toolkit, which is called Impact Toolkit, in which the main role is also the feedback by the women victims. They give the feedbacks about the changes of the men behavior, changes of the perpetrator's behavior. Is there any changes or nothing happened? That gives us information what to change, how to improve the program. It is also, again, like a prevention program, education prevention program for perpetrators. But through measuring the effectiveness, give us information and knowledge how to improve it, what to change in this prevention program to be better in our presenting, in our efforts to changing the behavior of perpetrators and to change the awareness of all society. That is the prevention in all levels, primary prevention through young people, secondary and tertiary, when the things happened. That's just to add to all these prevention efforts and all these prevention things. And thank you for presenting this a big event. I was forgot for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Any other? Yeah, go ahead. Iluta, did you have another comment?
Going to these issues about online environment and also this very violent environment, of course, it's really, I agree, it's really challenging to challenge this, because if you live in this environment, if you live within such families that justifies violence and pursues violence, and also even within institutions there is mobbing and so it's really important, of course, that we help also young people, but not only young people, adults, challenge what's going on. And one of the things I thought was this youth methodology that we have, but also within preschools, there is one child rights protection organization that has developed so-called Jimba school, so that also preschoolers, small children, even if they come from, whatever families, within preschools, they can learn within their language about major issues that you have to pay attention to. What are your bodily borders, what are good touches, what are bad touches, and stuff like this. This is really important, that you try to go against this stream of violence with very practical things and tools that helps you to understand whether you are what's happening, and whether it's healthy, unhealthy, and when it's time to report about crimes, and that you don't keep them secret, but you talk about this. And another thing is also talking about prevention and all this all online justification of violence and stuff going on. It's really important to have also within working environments, within academies, universities, whatever workplace you are, fuel stations, wherever you are, that there are policies in place that prevent violence, and that there are clear reporting systems if there is violence, and that there are systems how you can report crime further on to judiciary system. So this is really important, that people don't stay silent, but they report if something happens, and that whenever they report, that it's taken seriously.
Thank you for that, Iluta. And I believe that is so important when survivors can speak out and do speak out when they're experiencing something. But I think coming back to CCR, what we need as systemic advocates is to make sure that when survivors report, they are being heard, they aren't being shamed, they are being believed, they aren't being shamed, I'm sorry. So that's on us as systems folks, and certainly legal system stakeholders, police, prosecutors, judges, and all of the folks that you mentioned, Iluta. Let's make sure that as we encourage survivors to report, that their reporting doesn't end up hurting them, and rather ends up actually promoting their safety and promoting the idea of offender accountability. I think that's a challenge we have so much. We're always encouraging, we do want people to report violence, but they may be choosing not to report it based on very, very solid evidence of the harm that they would suffer if they do. So that's an important thing, I think, for everybody to remember also. Other comments, or maybe one last question? If not, I think
we
oh,
have,
go ahead, Iluta, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
We had one question about have the police begun to understand non-state torture as a reality? And if Desi wants to take this, I know Deanna had talked about everyone working to be on the same page, so I thought.
Yeah. Jesse, were you able to hear that?
Can you, excuse me, can you please say it again, the question? Because something with my sound happened. About the torture, but I didn't listen the adjective.
Yeah, it's about police understanding non-state torture as a reality.
I want to tell you that now in Bulgaria, since the summer of last year, we changed our legal frame, and now we are in some how to say dynamic times, because up to now in Bulgaria we haven't any risk assessment mechanism. Now we are trying to do that, and because up to now the police officers were working on the crime scene only on their experience as persons, as police officers. Not we haven't got any tools. Many of the police officers were not able to read the signs of strangulation, for example. And last year, during one project from the Norwegian front, we, together with Diana and some other experts from different ministries and NGOs, we have educated 400 police officers that are dealing on the first level on the field, how to read the indicators. What does that mean? That the victim live in these conditions of lethal risk. And in the beginning, it was strange for many of our colleagues. After that, when we explained letter by letter, action by action, all these indicators, now there are common understanding among the big mass of the police officers. But this is one of the things that we work together with our police academy, because this knowledge now has to be implemented in the beginning of the career of our colleagues. Because one mistake, one life. And we said it's not my mistake. It's not the mistake of my colleague 100 kilometers away. It's the mistake of the police, and police is one. Because on the media, it will be written the police, not my name or to my boss or another person. And now we are working on this level together with one more thing that we are trying to do. We form automated informational system to collect the data, because up to now we haven't got any statistics relevant to this phenomenon. And if we cannot measure this phenomenon, we cannot analyze, we cannot plan some effective measures. Now, Ministry of Interior and particularly National Police, where I'm working, I was one of the coordinators of this project. We finished our automated informational systems, and we will have two levels to feed with information the system. One of them will be the number and the information that is read it in the from the court. That was the word about the orders, restricted order from the court, and the other will be the signal from the emergency number 112 and the report of the police officer. So on this way, we will try to collect all the data, because you know that not all the survivors want to speak with police or with someone who can help them. They just want the violence to stop in this particular moment. And We think that we will have this experience when we collect data from one address, and police officers were there, let's say, 5 or 10 times during the last month. We will note that this is the hot point. So we have to act, never mind the decision of the victim. So it's a long process, you know. You are many steps in front of us, but we walk together on this march. And this is the way from Bulgaria. And it's not the police. Police is just one finger of the fist. So we are together, all of us. Thank you.
Well, Desislava, that's a wonderful way to end this webinar. If we aren't all in this and working to what we can do together from our own perspectives, we're just not going to end this pandemic, global pandemic of violence against women. So that's the theme, really, of the coordinated community response. I just want to thank you all so much. You are just champions. Diana, Iluta, Desislava, Nicole, you are champions of this critical effort globally to end violence against women through systemic and legal reform and CCR. And I am so grateful that you took the time here at the CSW to share your experiences with all of us. Thank you again, and we'll sign off now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thank you.